In 1953, at the height of Cold War anxiety, when the world lived under the constant shadow of nuclear fear, Hollywood unleashed a cinematic phenomenon that would forever redefine the science fiction genre, the War of the Worlds. Yet behind the spectacle of Martian war machines lay a production journey just as grueling and uncertain as the battle depicted on screen. Here are some of the lesser-known stories behind this masterpiece. 1. A decade of rejection and the trauma called the Cold War. Few people realize that bringing H.G. Wells' masterpiece to the big screen was a journey marked by persistent rejection. Producer George Pal had secured the rights as early as 1950, but Paramount Pictures repeatedly dismissed the project, clinging to the belief that science fiction was little more than cheap, juvenile entertainment with no real commercial value. Everything changed in 1951, when the world found itself spiraling deeper into nuclear tension and reports of unidentified flying objects, UFOs, began flooding newspapers. Suddenly, the fear of an unexpected attack from above, whether from extraterrestrials or Cold War adversaries, became all too real. Studio executives had a realization: public fear itself was an untapped goldmine. Translating the terrifying visions of Wells' novel into vivid cinematic imagery was no longer just an artistic endeavor. It became a calculated business strategy. The film would capitalize on humanity's deepest anxieties, turning collective dread into box office success. In that sense, the birth of the War of the Worlds was not only a cinematic milestone, but also a mirror reflecting the psychological turmoil of an entire era. 2. From clumsy footsteps to a floating nightmare. In H.G. Wells' original novel, the towering three-legged tripods were the ultimate symbol of terror. However, bringing them to life on a 1950s film set proved to be a formidable technical challenge. The production team experimented tirelessly with various techniques, from meticulous stop-motion animation to complex mechanical models, but the results were consistently disappointing. On screen, the machines appeared unstable, weightless, and at times even unintentionally comical. Faced with the risk of total creative failure, production designer Al Nozaki made a bold, revolutionary decision: abandon the mechanical legs altogether. In their place, he introduced an eerie anti-gravity concept. The Martian machines were reimagined as sleek, manta ray-like crafts, gliding ominously through the air, suspended by nearly invisible wires. This creative pivot did more than solve a technical problem. It transformed the very nature of the alien threat. The hovering war machines felt unnatural, silent, and far more menacing. Their smooth, drifting movement, combined with their deadly heat rays, created an unforgettable visual language of fear. These floating, almost organic vessels became an iconic nightmare, one that not only defined the War of the Worlds, but also reshaped the aesthetic and imagination of science fiction cinema for generations to come. 3. Gene Barry, the stand-in who bet everything on authenticity. The role of Dr. Clayton Forrester was initially considered a poisoned chalice among Hollywood's leading men of the era. Many A-list actors declined outright, fearing their reputations would suffer if they were seen fleeing from puppets or acting opposite lifeless models and special effects. Amid this uncertainty, Gene Barry, then a stage actor striving to establish himself, approached the role with a completely different mindset: absolute sincerity. Rather than forcing himself into the mold of a stereotypical, muscle-bound 1950s hero, Barry chose a more nuanced path. He portrayed Forrester as a genuine scientist, intelligent and composed, yet visibly shaken and overwhelmed by the incomprehensible power of an alien invasion. Through subtle expressions and restrained body language, he infused emotional depth into scenes that might otherwise have felt hollow or artificial. His grounded performance gave life to the film's visual effects, transforming spectacle into something human and relatable. This instinctive choice not only elevated the film, but also helped establish Clayton Forrester as a prototype for the intellectual protagonist facing catastrophic threats, a character archetype that would echo throughout science fiction cinema for decades to come. 4. When the line between cinema and disaster disappeared. The iconic opening attack sequence in the War of the Worlds nearly turned into a real-life catastrophe in the town of Corona, California. To convincingly portray the destructive power of the Martian heat rays, the special effects team meticulously rigged real buildings with explosives and flame systems. But during filming, the unexpected happened. A sudden shift in wind direction caused the flames to spread uncontrollably, quickly escalating beyond the limits of cinematic illusion. Within moments, the set transformed into an actual inferno. Local firefighters were urgently called in to prevent the blaze from engulfing the town. Remarkably, amid the chaos, the director and camera operators continued filming, capturing footage that was as dangerous as it was visually stunning. George Pal later admitted that they were incredibly fortunate no lives were lost. Yet ironically, this near-disaster yielded some of the most hauntingly authentic images in the film, sequences so visceral that no staged effect could ever truly replicate them. 5. Echoes from a bathroom. When guitar strings became a weapon of destruction. The chilling, razor-sharp sound of the Martian heat ray, an eerie sonic signature that has haunted audiences for over 70 years, did not originate from advanced electronic equipment. Instead, it was born from an unexpected place, a bathroom with perfect natural acoustics. A sound technician devised an ingenious experiment. Using wet fingers, he slowly and firmly slid them along the strings of an electric guitar connected to a high-powered amplifier. The resulting friction produced a strange, otherworldly tone. When amplified and processed through the relatively primitive filters of the 1950s, the sound took on a mechanical, alien quality, unlike anything audiences had ever heard before. It was neither an explosion nor a gunshot, but something entirely new. A metallic scream stretched into an unearthly wail. This fusion of vibrating strings and sustained resonance created a sound that felt both unnatural and deeply unsettling. The result became an unforgettable audio signature, a defining element of the film's identity. It stands as a testament to Hollywood's golden age, an era when technological limitations were overcome through boundless creativity and hands-on experimentation, producing effects that remain iconic to this day. 6. Anne Robinson, from studio secretary to cinematic icon. Anne Robinson's journey to landing the role of Sylvia Van Buren stands as one of Hollywood's most remarkable rags-to-riches stories. At the time, she was simply a studio secretary who decided, almost on a whim, to audition after some casual encouragement from friends. She came unprepared, with no grand ambition and little belief in the project itself. In fact, halfway through the audition, she nearly walked out, convinced that a film about monsters and aliens was destined to fail and would offer no real future for her career. Yet it was precisely this sense of having nothing to lose, combined with her natural, unforced presence, that caught the attention of producer George Pal. He was captivated by the unique blend she brought to the role, a delicate vulnerability paired with quiet resilience, the essence of an ordinary woman facing extraordinary catastrophe. The moment and delivered her lines, Pal reportedly exclaimed with excitement, "This is our Sylvia." Her lack of artifice breathed authenticity into the film, allowing 1950s audiences to see themselves reflected in her struggle for survival. Through Robinson's performance, Sylvia became more than just a character. She became a human anchor in a story of cosmic destruction, grounding the spectacle in emotional truth. 7. George Pal, a defining gamble and the soul of the film. When the intense farmhouse sequence began driving production costs to alarming levels, studio accountants pushed back hard. They demanded that the scene be cut or significantly simplified to protect the budget. But producer George Pal, guided by a visionary instinct, refused. He understood that this was not merely an action sequence. It was the emotional core of the film. In that confined space, the alien threat ceased to be a distant, global catastrophe and became immediate, personal, and suffocatingly real. To defend his creative vision, Pal made an extraordinary decision. He personally guaranteed to cover any financial losses with his own salary if the scene failed. This bold gamble paid off. The sequence became one of the most suspenseful moments in cinematic history. The image of the Martian probe slowly extending through the doorway, its eerie touch reaching towards Sylvia in the darkness, remains an enduring symbol of primal fear. It proved a timeless truth. The most powerful artistic moments often emerge from unwavering conviction and the willingness to risk everything for a vision. 8. Giant models. When accidents become masterpieces. In an era long before digital effects, creating the Martian war machines was a formidable engineering challenge. Contrary to what many might assume, these models were far from small. Built at a 1/3 scale, each machine weighed over 90 kilograms and required meticulous craftsmanship. To simulate their eerie, floating motion, the technical team relied on ultra-thin yet incredibly strong piano wires. Controlling these massive constructs demanded precision down to the millimeter. But the immense weight placed enormous strain on the system, leading to a now legendary accident. During a crucial scene, one of the cables suddenly snapped. The heavy war machine plummeted, smashing into the miniature city below and obliterating everything in an instant. Instead of reacting with frustration over the destruction of painstaking work, George Pal burst into laughter. With the eye of a true master, he recognized that the raw impact, the authentic crash, the chaotic debris, the clouds of dust, captured a level of realism no staged effect could ever replicate. He made the bold decision to keep the footage in the final cut, transforming a technical failure into one of the most striking and memorable moments in science fiction film history. 9. Sir Cedric Hardwicke. When disdain creates authenticity. To lend gravitas to the iconic opening narration of The War of the Worlds, the producers enlisted Sir Cedric Hardwicke, a distinguished Shakespearean actor and a knighted figure in the world of performing arts. Yet few people know that Hardwicke himself felt little enthusiasm for the project. In fact, he reportedly regarded the script with a certain degree of disdain, viewing it as shallow and unworthy compared to the classical literary works he was accustomed to performing. As a result, he delivered his narration with a detached, almost clinical tone, devoid of the emotional intensity one might expect from an action-driven science fiction film. Paradoxically, it was precisely this deliberate lack of warmth that elevated the narration. His voice took on the quality of an academic chronicle, transforming the Martian invasion from a sensational fantasy into something resembling a cold, historical account, inevitable, factual, and chillingly real. Hardwicke's restrained delivery cast a shadow of fatalism over the entire film, making the unfolding catastrophe feel less like fiction and more like an event already written into history. It stands as a powerful reminder that sometimes the tension between an artist's personal perspective and the material can produce results far more profound than originally intended. 10. When harsh reality entered the screen, the touch of the atomic bomb. The sequence depicting the military's attempt to stop the Martian invasion with an atomic bomb was not created through conventional special effects or miniature explosions. Instead, the filmmakers took a bold and unprecedented step. They obtained permission from the U.S. military to use authentic footage of real nuclear tests conducted in the Nevada desert in 1953. The towering mushroom cloud, rising with terrifying force, consuming everything in a blinding flash, was not an illusion. It was a genuine image of humanity's most destructive invention, brought directly into a science fiction narrative. This integration created a profound psychological impact on audiences. It blurred the boundary between cinematic fiction and the grim reality of the Cold War. What viewers witnessed was not merely an alien threat, but a reflection of their own world, one already capable of unimaginable devastation. The footage served not just as a storytelling device, but as a stark reminder. The horrors of the atomic age were real, immediate, and perhaps even more frightening than any extraterrestrial enemy. 11. The deadly green glow, when a technical flaw redefined cinematic language. In early concept designs, the Martian heat ray was intended to glow a fiery red, the traditional color of destruction, blood, and violence. However, when tested on film, a significant problem emerged. Due to the limitations of color technology at the time, red appeared washed out on screen, often shifting into a weak, pinkish hue that lacked intensity and menace. After numerous failed attempts to correct the issue with filters and lighting adjustments, the effects team made a last-minute decision. They switched to green, the only viable option remaining. What began as a compromise turned into a breakthrough. The green beam delivered an entirely different visual impact, one that felt alien, unnatural, and unsettling. It suggested a form of energy beyond human understanding, cold and impersonal in its destructive force. This accidental innovation redefined how audiences perceived extraterrestrial technology. The eerie green glow became an enduring symbol of otherworldly power, shaping the visual language of science fiction for generations to come. 12. The final faith, the battle to preserve the church scene. The haunting final scene inside the church, where survivors gather in prayer as the world collapses around them, was the subject of intense behind-the-scenes conflict. Paramount executives strongly opposed its inclusion, arguing that the overt religious tone would weigh down the film and risk controversy. But producer George Pal stood firm, defending the scene with a deeply human argument. When death falls from the sky and humanity's most advanced weapons prove useless, the only thing left to unite people is faith and their connection to one another. He believed that salvation was not merely about divine intervention, but about the instinct to come together in humanity's darkest moments. The debate was ultimately settled during the first test screening. As the scene unfolded, the audience fell into a profound, reverent silence, moved by its emotional and spiritual weight. That reaction became the deciding vote. The scene was preserved, escaping the editor's cuts and securing its place as one of the most powerful and contemplative endings in the history of disaster cinema. 13. Byron Haskin and George Pal, a clash between two perfectionist giants. The making of The War of the Worlds was not only a battle on screen, but also a fiery confrontation behind the scenes between director Byron Haskin and producer George Pal. Driven by an almost extreme perfectionism, Pal demanded that every frame, from lighting to the movement of the models, reach absolute precision. The tension reached its peak during the farmhouse sequence, when the crew was pushed to work an exhausting 18-hour stretch under immense pressure. Unable to endure the strain any longer, Haskin erupted in frustration, threw the script to the ground, and stormed off the set. He drove straight home, seriously contemplating abandoning his directing career altogether. Yet this rupture was mended through a deeply human gesture, a sincere and humble apology from George Pal the following morning. Both men came to realize that, despite their clashes, they shared a singular goal, creating a cinematic marvel that neither could achieve alone. Ultimately, it was the fusion of Pal's uncompromising artistic vision and Haskin's masterful direction that gave birth to a timeless masterpiece, proving that even the fiercest creative conflicts can lead to greatness when guided by mutual respect. 14. The art of concealment, when limitations become terror. In The War of the Worlds, the terror of the Martians does not come from fully revealed images, but from fleeting shadows and haunting glimpses. Ironically, this artistic choice was born from a rather harsh reality. The original creature costume looked unconvincing, almost comical, resembling a puppet from a children's show rather than a terrifying alien invader. Recognizing that fully exposing the creature would shatter the film's tension, George Pal made a decisive and brilliant choice: keep it hidden. By revealing only fragments, such as eerie three-fingered hands or ghostly silhouettes, he forced the audience's imagination to fill in the gaps, conjuring fears far more powerful than anything shown directly. This less is more strategy not only saved the film from ridicule, but also became a cornerstone of cinematic psychology. Decades later, this very principle would be famously employed by Steven Spielberg in Jaws, turning limitation into one of the most effective tools for creating suspense and terror. 15. Death by Microbes: The Fall of Arrogant Gods. The film's unexpected ending, where the mighty Martian war machines collapse due to microscopic organisms, sparked intense debate upon its release. Yet beneath that apparent anticlimax lies a powerful and deliberate message embedded by H.G. Wells. It serves as a sharp critique of Western colonialism. Just as European empires once conquered distant lands with advanced weaponry, only to inadvertently bring diseases that devastated native populations, the Martians face a poetic and brutal reversal of fate. Their downfall does not come from human weapons, neither missiles nor atomic bombs, but from the very microorganisms they deemed insignificant. This conclusion is a humbling rebuke to any civilization that believes technological superiority grants dominion over nature. It reminds us that, in the face of the Earth's ancient ecosystems and the delicate balance of life, even the most advanced war machines are ultimately powerless. More than just a science fiction ending, it is a philosophical warning, a reminder of humanity's fragile place within the vast universe, and a cautionary tale for any species that dares to mistake power for invincibility. 16. The Oscar win and the Academy's unbelievable investigation. The victory of The War of the Worlds at the 1954 Academy Awards for Best Visual Effects was not only a triumph. It also sparked an unprecedented wave of skepticism within the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Officials were so astonished that they found it difficult to believe a film with such a modest budget could produce visuals of such breathtaking realism. In fact, they went so far as to dispatch an inspection team to the studio to determine whether George Pal had cheated by incorporating existing military footage. Faced with this doubt, George Pal personally guided the delegation through a labyrinth of intricate miniatures, complex piano wire rigging systems, and painstakingly crafted color filters. He demonstrated that the film's sophistication did not come from borrowed archives, but from the ingenuity and craftsmanship of visual effects artists working at the cutting edge of their time. This convincing display not only secured the film's Oscar, but also forced the Academy to fundamentally reconsider the artistic and technical potential of science fiction cinema in bringing the unimaginable to life. 17. Gordon Jennings: When Color Became a Language of Emotion. At a time when color grading was still in its infancy, cinematographer Gordon Jennings orchestrated a quiet revolution with The War of the Worlds. He refused to let color merely reflect reality. He wanted it to communicate. Jennings boldly pushed fiery reds to their limits during invasion sequences, evoking suffocation, destruction, and chaos. In contrast, moments of calm and hope were softened with cool blue tones, suggesting relief and the possibility of salvation. His approach was so ahead of its time that laboratory technicians repeatedly returned the film reels, assuming the exaggerated hues were technical errors in exposure or color balance. Yet Jennings stood firm, defending his artistic vision against industry skepticism. His persistence transformed color from a purely technical element into an invisible emotional narrator, shaping audience perception and setting a precedent for modern cinematic storytelling through color palettes. 18. A marketing turning point, from children's sci-fi to psychological masterpiece. Early test screenings of The War of the Worlds initially dealt a harsh blow to the filmmakers' expectations, receiving lukewarm, and often negative, reactions. Younger male audiences, anticipating a straightforward action spectacle filled with explosions and spectacle, felt disappointed by the film's deliberate pacing and philosophical undertones. Rather than panicking or cutting the film, George Pal recognized the real issue, not the quality of the work, but the mismatch between the film and its target audience. In response, he persuaded Paramount to execute a bold marketing pivot. The film was repositioned, not as simple entertainment, but as a mature, psychologically driven narrative, where grand visual effects served merely as a backdrop for exploring humanity's fragility in the face of global catastrophe. This strategic shift proved remarkably effective. By appealing to a more intellectually engaged audience, the film not only found its rightful viewers but also achieved major box office success. In doing so, it redefined the commercial and artistic potential of science fiction cinema, cementing its status as a timeless classic that transcended genre expectations. 19. The in-camera miracle, when synchronization replaced algorithms. The sequence in which the Martian war machine slowly rises from the meteor crater, radiating lethal light while smoke billows into the air, stands as a powerful testament to the pinnacle of in-camera filmmaking. Throughout those breathtaking 30 seconds, there was no reliance on post-production effects or computer-generated imagery. Instead, it was a meticulously orchestrated mechanical ballet, where dozens of crew members had to move in perfect harmony, like the gears of a finely tuned clock. From technicians maneuvering the heavy model suspended on delicate wires, to teams controlling smoke and flickering light, to the cinematographer executing an exceptionally smooth dolly shot, every element had to align flawlessly. A single misstep, whether a tangled wire, an overly dense cloud of smoke, or even a slight miscalculation in camera movement, would have ruined the entire take, forcing the crew to rebuild the scene from scratch over several days. The success of this shot was not merely a visual achievement. It was a triumph of human coordination and craftsmanship. It delivered a sense of physical presence, weight, and authenticity that even the most advanced CGI algorithms today often struggle to replicate with the same visceral impact. 20. The War of the Worlds, when cinemas became sanctuaries of existential fear. The resounding success of The War of the Worlds was not driven by visual effects alone. It was also shaped by a grim historical coincidence. The film premiered at a time when the Soviet Union had just conducted its first hydrogen bomb test, pushing the arms race to a terrifying new peak. For the American public, the idea of catastrophic destruction raining down from the sky was no longer confined to fiction. It had become an ever-present, looming reality. Going to the cinema was no longer a simple form of entertainment. It became an encounter with humanity's deepest existential fears. The alien war machines on screen, with their devastating heat rays, served as symbolic stand-ins for the specter of nuclear annihilation hanging over the world. The film triumphed because it did more than tell a story about extraterrestrial invasion. It spoke the true language of its time, a language shaped by anxiety, apocalyptic dread, and the primal instinct for survival in the volatile atomic age. From junk in a garage to priceless artifacts, the rescue of cinematic relics. After the final call of cut, strict studio policies dictated that the iconic Martian war machines, once central to the film's spectacle, were to be dismantled and discarded as obsolete props to free up storage space. To the studio, they were nothing more than bulky remnants of a completed production. Yet one anonymous technician, deeply moved by the spirit of the film, made a quiet and extraordinary decision. He secretly rescued 3 of the manta ray-shaped machines and stored them in his old garage, where they remained hidden for decades. For years, they lay dormant beneath layers of dust, dismissed as worthless scrap. It was not until the 1970s, when interest in film memorabilia began to surge, that these forgotten relics were rediscovered. Emerging from obscurity, they were suddenly recognized for what they truly were: invaluable pieces of cinematic history, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Ultimately, these machines, once destined for destruction, found a new home at the Smithsonian Institution, where they are preserved and displayed as enduring symbols of a bygone era. They stand as a powerful reminder of a time when filmmakers, armed only with practical ingenuity and handcrafted techniques, were able to bring the boundless imagination of science fiction vividly to life.